a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, the Turning of the Tide, edition. I am John Bonus, Twins Daily, with me, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic.
First of all, that was such a forceful intro, John. Second of all, it loses a little something when every intro for every show we do for months about this team is turning the tide, turning things around. Is this the start of something? But it's just like little synonyms for the same.
Little bit.
Yeah, this is what happens when you're a 500 team.
I mean, it's also we've said this a lot. Almost every time, our perception or our mood going into despite the fact that there's 162 games and we know that they're only each worth 162nd of the season, our mood is definitely impacted by the last game that we just had.
Yeah, although if that were really true, like if my mood were truly based on the last game that I've witnessed the Twins play, I'd have quit the podcast after last night's game. We'd be done. I'd be on another career. I'd be probably happier in life. But
maybe it would be impacted by T-Pain. How was T-Pain?
Yeah.
Did you stick around for it?
I did. Well, yeah. I mean, it wasn't really a choice. Yeah. The concert was happening whether I stuck around for it or not. Yeah, I can say I've been to a T-Pain concert. Now, I'll say this about T-Pain. I wasn't really excited to see a T-Pain concert, which was post-game at Target Field last night. But he had many more songs than I expected to recognize. Like, where I'm like, okay, he's on that. Or that's his song. Like, right, yeah. I didn't think there were any. It's just I
feel the same way about Pitbull because he took me to a Pitbull concert when we were in Vegas. It turns out it was one of the best concerts I've ever been to. It was really, really fun.
I mean, I know a lot of Pitbull songs. Maybe that says more about me than anything. But so last year this might be the second post game concert they've had, like full on concert that they've had. I know last year there was a guy Cole Swindell who I wasn't really familiar with, country singer. And in fact, we were on the field. It was like same time last year, basically. And we were on the field for BP. All the writers just, you can go watch BP from the dugout or whatever. And I was just standing next to this guy for like 20 minutes, just some random guy. I think he was wearing like basketball shorts and a t-shirt. And I'm like, this, once in a while, or pretty much every game, there's people with what are called field passes, which are just guests of a player or guests of a Twins employee or whoever, they won a contest, whatever it is. And so they're just kind of milling around during BP, similar to how the writers are milling around. They have
yes.
They're just as out of place as the writers watching.
Just awkwardly standing on the field in different places, trying to find a place not to be in the way.
Right. But I stood next to this dude for like 15, 20 minutes and, made a little small talk. And then like at the end of it, midway through batting practice, I forget if it was Dustin Morse or somebody else from the Twins came up and like, hugged this guy and then said to us like, hey, Cole Swindell, here he is, the man. Like, and I went, oh, hey man, how's it going? And then I left early for that concert because I wanted to beat the traffic. But I stayed for T-Pain, and it was fine. It's a weird vibe, the post game concert, because it's decently attended, I would say, but not full, and all the lights are on. Like it does not have a concert vibe. It's like it seems like more of like a noon concert, like because it's lit. How the Twins game is lit, basically,
right?
Which is, it's like watching a movie in a lit theater. It's like, yeah, okay. And then also they don't want to wreck the field. I mean, they don't like wrecking the field for like Paul McCartney. Right. But they do it because it sells, 50,000 tickets or whatever it is. So they'll just shred the outfield because. But for this, they were clearly like, well, we're not screwing up the field because they got to play tomorrow. Like all the full concerts that they do, like later, there's the Killers and
Magic Dragons
or whatever.
Death Cab for Cutie.
Those are during road trips, usually at the beginning of extended road trips or during the All-Star break, so that they have, time to make the field better afterward. Well, that's not the case here. I mean, they're playing tonight. So they basically they like roped off the baselines, like from first base to second base and from second base to third base, like the dirt paths for the bases.
Yeah.
So that was like the pit or like the VIP. So people like it was like roped off. So there were like, maybe a few hundred people in the baselines, like in their own section, and then no one else on the field, and then the stands.
So I'm sorry. The way you're saying that, there aren't people in the infield, right? They were on the area of the grass around the infield, or were they actually in the infield?
They were in the infield, but only on the dirt.
Okay.
Because
Gotcha.
they didn't want to screw up the grass.
Okay, gotcha.
And so it was like partitioned off. So you had like sort of a pit, except then you had, the grass part of the infield, the pitcher's mound, the batter's box, home plate, where the on deck circles are, and then the dugout area is just empty, and then the normal, seated crowd. So it was like it almost looked like people probably would recognize like from the Super Bowl, where they'll have like 300 people rush the stage at the Super Bowl so that it looks like a concert might look.
Yeah,
and then there's just nothing surrounding it. But it was very strange to be sitting in the press box watching a fully lit concert where there were like 300 people around the stage, 500 feet of nothing, and then like, I don't know, I'll say 5 to something thousand people sitting in the stand. People were into it. Like, I don't want to say anything bad about T-Pain. He did fine, but I don't know. It's just it's a strange vibe. But also, don't listen to me. I haven't been to a concert in a very long time. I'm going to
listen to Grandpa Gleeman when it comes.
Yeah,
to
Grandpa Gleeman. Grandpa Gleeman is going to a stand-up comedy show tonight at the Ordway because he prefers stand-up comedy to music, and really mostly prefers standing down or sitting down to standing up for an actual music show. So don't listen to what Grandpa Gleeman thinks of T-Pain. But yeah, it was fine. There's another one. It's a country artist I've never heard of. Next month, I think, similar. So yes. Yeah, they got 27,000. I want to say was the attendance last night. Which, trust me, there weren't going to be even 20,000 people at a Thursday game against the Tigers.
Right.
So in that sense, T-Pain paid off.
Okay, good.
I'll ask you what I asked Dan Hayes. What does a T-Pain make from a post-game concert in Minnesota, do you think?
Oh, boy.
I had a guess, and then Dan looked it up.
Personally makes, or like how much the Twins end up paying, whatever?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know, personally makes. I mean, I don't know what his lawyers and his agent get, but like, what do the Twins have to pay the entity known as T-Pain for a concert, do you think?
Wow.
Just ballpark.
$100,000?
See, that's interesting. That's what Dan said. Dan said 50 to 100,000.
Yeah, that's where I was going to.
And he told me to write down my guess, and my guess was 10,000. So it's possible Grandpa Gleeman's a little out of date on that too, but it paid off. So yeah, I think he Googled it, and it said like, if you'd like T-Pain for your corporate whatever or festival, it's $75 to $140,000 or something.
Oh, okay.
So I decided against having him for my birthday based on that pricing. If I were having a bar mitzvah coming up, let's say, if this were 1996, I would think about it. It would be worth it.
And you had that sweet Patreon money coming in.
That's right. If 13-year-old me at going to Temple in St. Paul at 1996 had that sweet Patreon money, we certainly would have done better than the crappy DJ that we got.
Where was the 13-year-old Gleeman's bar mitzvah held?
The bar mitzvah's at the Temple, but the party was at Northwest Racquetball Club. Like I forget which location.
That's a big spender.
No, not really. It might have been. Honestly, it might have been free. But mine was near the tail end of a year full of bar and bat mitzvah parties. So basically, I don't know why I'm going through what happens to Jewish kids on this podcast. But when you're 13, you have a bar mitzvah. When you're 12 or 13, you have a bar mitzvah. And so like my Sunday school class, everybody that year, there were 50 kids or whatever it is. They all had their bar or bat mitzvah, bar for boys and bat for girls. And so you get invited to one literally every weekend and sometimes two a weekend. Like sometimes you have to choose. Right. Like, hey, do I want to go to Tracy's party or Dan's party? Like, what is and so mine was in.
Is it always Saturdays?
Yeah, the bar mitzvah is Friday and Saturday, and then the party's like Saturday night usually. Sometimes Sunday. but mine was like on Mother's Day weekend, I think, for some reason. And by the time that rolled around, I had been to like 40 bar mitzvah parties, and about 2/3 of them were just a DJ or a band, at the temple itself or some location. And so I was like, I'm sick of that. I don't want to do that. I've been slow dancing with these same 8 girls who probably hate me, to Boys to Men for 40 weeks in a row. Nobody needs another one of that. So we like played basketball and went swimming and stuff. But I don't know why I'm talking about this other than it relates in my head to TV.
Well, I'll give you a transition.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of bar mitzvah badminton, I'm in Philadelphia the reason if you are getting some warble at some point during the hour and a half episodes that we generally do, we should probably call out. It's because I am in Philadelphia. We are doing this from 1,000 miles apart, and I'm here because of a different rite of passage: graduation. My son's graduating college. He had he's actually got two graduation ceremonies, one for like his school and then one for the whole university. And the school one was last night, and the university one is supposedly tonight, and it's supposedly at Citizen Bank Stadium, where the Phillies play. Citizen Bank Ballpark, I'm sorry, where the Phillies play, except for 2 things. The first is it's going to be a little bit of a nightmare because Philadelphia has a sports complex. All their stadiums are in one area, and playing right next door in the Lincoln at the Link where the Eagles play is Billy Joel tonight.
Yeah.
So,
who, by the way, can I just say, Billy Joel has had a bar mitzvah.
But I was going to say, I was at my friend's bar mitzvah. Played my friend's bar mitzvah.
No, I'm saying he had one. He's probably maybe he's played. He might have played one too. Who knows?
Way back in the early 70s, maybe.
Yeah,
early 60s. And then the other thing is that after it's supposed to be a very cool event, but it's also supposed to be thunderstorming during it today. So yeah. I don't know if it's even going to happen. So.
Have you thought about, as a way to celebrate your son Riggs's graduation, maybe hiring T-Pain for some sort of post-graduation?
That is a great idea. We went to a Brazilian steakhouse instead.
How did that? Was that like
70? It was about the same cost as T-Pain, to be honest.
$75,000 for that. Okay,
it was not Fogo de Chao. It was a local one.
Okay, yeah, I haven't. Well, we don't need to talk about that. I guess I'm in the mood to be easily distracted this morning.
Well, otherwise you got to talk about Sonny Gray's pitching last night.
Yeah, that's right. So so Twins. Same story. They lose the 5 in a row to Cleveland and Tampa. They go on the road to Toronto, which has been a very difficult road trip for them historically, and they take 2 out of 3. But even in taking 2 out of 3. They blow their chance to sweep with a pretty ugly loss for the one loss that they took. Then they bounce back. They come back home for the start of a 10-game homestand, an extended homestand, and they sweep the 2-game mini series from Milwaukee, including the very dramatic Carlos Correa walk-off to cap a 4-run rally against probably the best reliever in the National League, Devin Williams, the Brewers closer. And then you think to yourself, okay, they got a little momentum here. They've bounced back. They got up off the canvas after being knocked down.
Offense is scoring some runs.
Yep. And then they just lay a complete egg against a Detroit Tigers team that is just decimated by injuries and not that good to begin with. And they had lost, 9 in a row, 8 in a row, 8 of 9, whatever it is. I think they lost like 11 of 12 or something. Yeah. And were swept yesterday swept the day before in a doubleheader. Yeah, I mean it's they lost. This is one of those, sometimes you say, the other team won. You didn't really lose your game, and this is the opposite. The Twins didn't really, the Tigers didn't really win this game. The Twins just lost it over and over again. You mentioned Sonny Gray, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, but they score the 4 runs early, thanks largely to Donovan Solano's second homer in 4 games after previously going 62 games without a home run, dating back to last season. They get out to a 4. They score a 4 spot there, and I guess it was 4-1 at that point, and then that's it. And that's a very familiar story for the offense, both this year and especially last year, where it was like they'd score 3 in the first or 5 in the first 3, and then just completely vanish offensively, and that's kind of what happened. And then Sonny Gray was cruising initially, then had a really rough 4th inning where he walked 3, loaded the bases, threw, I think, 35 pitches, which is a lot for one inning, and then was removed, which we'll discuss the decision-making and aftermath of that shortly. And then the bullpen just came in and kind of imploded a little bit, and you lose a game to Detroit, but 3 more against Detroit, and then they also have 4 against Boston at home, and then after that, they go to Detroit. So, at some point here, you're going to have to take care of business against Detroit. Otherwise, 2 weeks from now, this is going to look a lot uglier than it is. But I don't know. I just keep coming back to, and we've discussed this, and players and Baldelli were asked about this last night, which is the vibe with this team is just sort of constantly, hey, we're better than this, and we'll get to a point where that shows. But will they? Are they? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
they've got to get it done, right? They've got to get there, right? I feel the same way. I keep waiting for like a 6-game winning streak or something. And that's why, listen, a random loss on a Thursday night because, suddenly some semi-reliable relievers are not so reliable in the middle innings. That happens 6 times a year.
Sure.
Right. Every baseball season. This is not a significant one, but it did start to feel like, okay, for most of the season, Detroit has been the team kind of chasing the Twins, which is, goofy enough, but they for up until this latest losing streak. And it felt like, okay, but we know they're really, really struggling. We've got 4 games against them. They're at home. A couple of big wins just preceding this, taking care of business versus Toronto. We've seen Correa come up with some huge hits, and that certainly feels like he's turning it around. So let's go. Let's take. Listen, we play Detroit 7 times in the next 10 games. Let's go 5-2 versus Detroit.
Right.
Start getting our team back to the high water mark for this team. I think this year has been 5 games above 500. It felt like, okay, we've got a chance to get out of this homestand 5 games over 500. Let's see what happens. Back to the high water mark.
Right.
And it's not that this doesn't make it impossible, but it's just now you're looking like, most likely going to split with Detroit. You don't want to split with Detroit,
Yeah. This team just sort of, they make the degree of difficulty for themselves higher than it needs to be. And also, they just got through what is the toughest part of their schedule for the whole season. Like they just completed it, and it didn't go particularly well, obviously. But we talked on the Patreon show a couple days ago about, I think it was the number was like 42 of the next 56, beginning with this Detroit series, were against teams that didn't have winning records, and their remaining strength of schedule for the entire season is the lowest in all of baseball. Right. But that's fine if you're not one of the teams that other teams are looking at on their schedule as weak spots. And so you have to, like you said, take care of business. Like, it doesn't do you any good to just theoretically have a weak strength of schedule, obviously. And within that, if the Tigers have a weak strength of schedule, who cares? Because the Tigers are themselves part of someone else's weak strength of schedule. And so the worry with the Twins at this point is, are the Twins a team that gets circled on the calendar of other teams or the schedule of other teams as like, all right, well, we'll take care of business against the Twins here, and then we'll get off to a good start and we'll blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. It's just such an up and down roller coaster of a season. And it just seems kind of needless in that so many of these losses and these momentum breaking losses, which, by the way, I'm fully on record as saying there is no such thing as momentum in baseball, but it gets talked about endlessly. If you've lost 3 in a row, if you won 3 in a row, every question from everyone is, how do you change the momentum or how do you keep the momentum? And the truth is you don't. It just happens or doesn't. But like, ultimately, are they better than, well, right now they're 35-34. Are they better than 35-34? Yeah, there's some signs of that. I think if you look at it individually or up and down the roster, or you just say they have very good pitching and the lineup should perform better and all that stuff, or you just look at like run differential.
Right, I was going to say that, yep.
Which they're, I don't know, plus 40 roughly or something like that. I think they're 6th best in the majors or something. You go, well, yeah, they should be better than this. But I mean, we're coming up on, I don't know, halfway through the season. Like it's those wins and losses are banked. Like you don't get to undo those really. And so that can work in your favor, but in a case like this, it works against you, which is, yeah, are they better than 35 and 34? Probably, especially given the upcoming schedule. I think they'll probably prove to be better than, right at 500. But you got to actually do it. You can't just talk about doing it, which there's been so much talk about them doing it, which is natural. But I'm sick of that. I'm sick of hearing
all that strength of schedule stuff is fine, but you know what that means is you've got to beat Detroit.
Yes.
Like what that's all pointing is, hey, we've got a whole lot of Detroit left of this game. You just lost to Detroit.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's natural for a team that should be better than their record to be, when they're asked about why are you not better than your record, or they're just asked about a loss that was painful like last night, to have them say, well, we're confident we're better than this and we'll get on track and I'm not worried about that and blah, blah, blah. But I don't want to get back to the confidence discussion we had with Dan Hayes on the Patreon, certainly. But it does kind of remind me of that, which is like, it's good that the people in that clubhouse believe that, or at least say that. I don't know that they believe it. I can't get inside their heads, but to everyone else, that doesn't really matter. Like their confidence levels or their faith in that or their trust in that or their, self-evaluation, it only matters to the extent that they can make it matter. It only matters to the extent that they can manifest it into actual wins and losses. And so the more weeks that go by and the more, 5-game losing streak followed by a good 5-game stretch, followed by you dump a game or two to a team you should definitely beat. And then everyone says afterward, well, don't worry, we'll start hitting and the pitching's good and we have faith. And you look around this clubhouse and it's too talented to be where it is. And it's like, well, what does that say for you guys at this point? Like, if that is true, first of all, it might not be true. And if it is true, what does that say? Are we just chalking this all up to bad luck? The fact that this just plays out the same way over and over and over again, which is, one step forward, one step back, you do well, and then you step on a rake. Like, what is, I don't know. It gets, I don't want to be like too harsh because I don't think it's uncommon for players and coaches and stuff to have that attitude. And it's better than the opposite attitude,
right?
Which is, oh my God, we suck. I'm not asking him to do that, but I think it as someone observing it or someone listening to it, I just get to a point where I kind of tune out. It's like, well, who cares? Like, do it or don't. Like, right. And so, yeah, that's where I am. It's probably been a similar theme to open the last 400 shows, but that's kind of where I am.
Just to take this to actual, they've got their next 10. Their next 10 games are versus teams with losing records, right? Red Sox have to have a losing record at this point, right? So, if you want to make a run, this is the time to make a run, right? This is the time. I guess 6-4 is great. 5-5 is going to be real disappointing. 7-3 is what you're kind of looking to do here and do some real damage and give yourself just a little bit more separation from Cleveland and the rest of the AL Central. Right. And this is the week to do that. Most of those games are at home. You've got 7 games at home and you've got 10 games versus teams that you should beat. And after that, by the way, you're not going to be on the road versus Atlanta and Baltimore. You don't want this, you're going to have to tread water there. So yeah, now's the time to make a difference. So.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a basketball team, you got to make your layups because you don't know that you're going to make your 3-pointers. You know what I mean? Like you got to win the games you're supposed to win. You got to take care of business on long homestands against bad teams because you don't know what's going to happen when you are in tougher situations. So I don't know. We don't get on this show, which we call the free show, the weekly show that you're listening to right now. Hello. Hi, everyone. That's you. I'm talking directly to you. We generally don't break down like individual games or moments. I mean, we talk about them, but we don't really get like in depth. If you want that sort of thing, we do that. It's just on the Patreon side, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. For instance, a couple days ago, Wednesday, we broke down like almost play by play through the comeback against Milwaukee that culminated with the Correa walk-off, and kind of talked about how it was built brick by brick and the important moments and some moments that kind of flew under the radar that were just as important as some of the other ones.
And some of the sabermetrics behind each of the
Right.
steps too.
So we're not going to, go back into that, especially because that seems like it was 5 months ago in my brain now. But if you like that, we would love to have you join us on the Patreon side to hear that sort of thing. Couple of, I guess, 3 significant roster moves since last we spoke, and we can talk about them in any order. They're all, lineup related. Byron Buxton came back from the injured list after missing 2 weeks with bruised ribs from the 97-mile-an-hour fastball that he took on a hit by pitch. He bumped Trevor Larnach back to AAA, which we can talk about. Similar timeline was Jorge Polanco going back on the injured list with more hamstring problems, and that corresponding move was Ed Julien coming up to replace him on the roster and step in as the primary second baseman. And then the other transaction on that front was Joey Gallo returning from the injured list, also where he was with a hamstring injury. And then that corresponding move was Kyle Garlick being sent down. This is now I say this at, let's look at the time, 7:33 Central Time, Friday, June 16th. The Twins lineup is about as healthy as it's ever going to get at this point. I mean, you're down Polanco.
Right.
And I say the time and the date because, like, by the time you guys listen to this, they might have 15 hitters on the IL the way things go with them. But, like, Polanco is out, and that hurts, as we've talked about. Polanco generally doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion, for his all-around impact when healthy. But the when healthy part with him has become so few and far between the last year and a half, basically, after he was essentially an Iron Man for the first 700 games of his career. He never went on the IL. He's been on the IL now 5 times since last June, and during that time, he's only played 76 games, and it's been kind of up and down during those 76 games. So aside from Polanco, and then the only other, regular, let's call him, on the IL is Nick Gordon, who's out with a fractured tibia. That's not fully healthy, but by Twin standards, that is fully healthy. I mean, that is, Baldelli even said actually pregame yesterday, someone asked him about, Buxton coming back and the state of the lineup, basically. And he said, we can wait for a fully healthy roster, but that such a thing may not ever exist over the course of a 162 game season for us or for any team, but certainly for the Twins. And so I kind of feel the same way. We've talked about that before, which is it doesn't, I don't want to say like provides cover, but it provides reason to kind of not get overly frustrated by the present when you can just constantly be saying, well, yeah, just wait until everyone comes back and then they'll be in good shape. But that's never going to happen. So this is about as close to healthy as the Twins lineup is going to get. You have Buxton back in the DH spot. You have Julien and Farmer basically platooning at second base in place of Polanco. And then you have Gallo back playing corner outfield, maybe some first base, mostly against righties, but he plays pretty much every day. So the only real change other than getting some of your better hitters back and getting another look at Julien, which I think is a good thing, is that they can no longer put out 9 right-handed hitters against a left-handed pitcher, which we saw last night. So they're back to having to choose one lefty bat to, kind of toss out there against the lefty. And for the first time, I think, in that situation, it was Alex Kirilloff who got the nod in that spot against Matthew Boyd last night. And not only that, he batted third. Which
I saw that. I'm surprised by that.
We just talked on the Patreon Wednesday again. I guess we were asked a mailbag question about platooning or why the Twins platoon young hitters like Kirilloff and other lefties mostly. And we talked a lot about that. And then to see the 2 days later, he's not only in there, which is fine against the lefty, but in there and batting third seems a little odd. But again, there are no real perfect, straightforward, ideal lineups at this point, given this group and how they're performing. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. The I don't know, from a health standpoint, Buxton, I'm assuming, is going to get a few days off here and there, but he's back as the DH. But of note, he returned without a rehab assignment,
Yep.
just like Max Kepler. Whereas
Yep.
like Gallo, for instance, went on a rehab assignment to AAA, and Kenta Maeda, it's different for pitchers, but Kenta Maeda has been on a rehab assignment with AAA for a couple weeks now and is starting tonight, actually making his fourth start, I want to say. Buxton went 0 for 4 in his return, which obviously could have happened even if he had gone on a rehab assignment. But it is starting to get weird. The guys who they choose to send on a rehab assignment and the guys they choose to just, hey, welcome back. You're right back in the lineup. Because I would guess, and I guess someone, me maybe, can go back through and crunch the numbers on this so that we're not just talking out of our butts here. But I'm going to guess the immediate, like, let's say 5 games for each of these players, Kepler being the primest example recently, who have jumped back into the lineup without a rehab assignment, they aren't real good. Like, except for Polanco, I would say.
Well,
nobody's
Polanco
really
actually probably skews all of the results to maybe good because
well,
he's just been.
Actually, let me say this: I misspoke because Polanco went on a rehab assignment. So,
oh, you're right.
So
Yep,
that's
right.
that's out. So it's interesting. Now they will tell you, the Twins will tell you that, with someone like Buxton, he's taking tons of swings in the cage. He's hitting off, velocity machines. He's doing all sorts of behind the scenes work that makes it so that they don't feel the rehab assignment is necessary. I also think it seems like Buxton has kind of indicated that he doesn't like going on rehab assignments in large part because he's been injured while on rehab assignments before, like he's been hit by pitches, or he's, strained a muscle that wasn't initially injured. And so I think given his history with injuries, his approach to rehabs are they more trouble than they're worth? Are they more dangerous than beneficial? And maybe that's a stretch logically, but it is true that I looked, he has been hurt on a couple of rehab assignments, and so I do kind of get from his standpoint where it's like, I don't need a rehab assignment, let's just jump back in here. But it's not a great look optics wise for Kepler or Buxton when they jump back in and go 2 for 25 or whatever, because
0 for 4 right away. Although he did get on base just because of that error, but but
it was 8-4 by that point.
Right.
We can talk. I don't know, maybe we'll go through some of these moves, what it means for the lineup. But first, let's do our sponsors here. The first sponsor is one of our longest time sponsors, which is Harry's Razors.
Yep. I will tell you, even if you have been a Harry's Razors customers, and I know a lot of our listeners have been Harry's Razors customers, I'd suggest maybe you take a look at them again, in part because you're going to want one for when you're traveling. I was so nice to be able to travel to Philadelphia and still be able to get the same close shave that I get at home because I've got Harry's Razors in my travel bag, as well as the Harry's Razors that I have at home. And
they have a craft handle starter set with the sleekest handle on their razors that they had left for just $10. It's got a $17 value. It's a good thing to like try out Harry's, or like you said, try Harry's again if it's been a while.
Yeah,
you get a razor with a craft handle. It's got 5-blade German engineered razor cartridge. It comes with shaving gel, and then, like you mentioned, comes with a very nice travel cover, so you can feel like you're a businessman on the road, even if you're just some schmuck going to Philadelphia for his kid's graduation.
That's right,
Don Draper.
That's it.
And
so this new one can become your home one, and then you can take your home one and turn it into your travel one. That's what I would suggest. Yeah, these craft ones are really very nice. They're very sort of metallic handle, but it's got kind of little rubber bumps on there, so it makes it a little easier to hold. It's very nice.
So Gleeman and the Geek listeners can elevate their shave with the latest and greatest in Harry's razor handle lineup. You can get your $17 value craft handle starter set for just $10. Go to harrys.com/Gleeman. That's Harrys, Harrys, harrys.com/Gleeman, and give it a try. And then our second sponsor.
Twins are in the middle of a huge homestand, and we have found one of the best ways to get tickets right now is the Game Time app. So what you do is you go to download the app, Game Time, all one word, Game Time. And what they do is I have used it half a dozen times already this season. We've got already, a couple of tickets to Twins games. Chrissy and I do, but we like to go with friends. We like to bring our daughter, and we go out there and grab just before game time a couple of tickets on the Game Time app.
Yeah, their specialty is sort of last minute tickets. Like if you just go, hey, we should go to this. And it's not just games, it's concerts, all kinds of stuff where you just go, you wake up that morning and you go, oh yeah, we should go to this. And then you think, it's going to be really hard to get tickets. Game Time specialty is last minute tickets and also just within that hard to find tickets. So,
That's right.
if you're thinking it's going to be hard to get, download the app and at least give it a try. Go
concerts
look for
too. Probably
So
even beyond concerts at Target Field like T-Pain.
That's right. You can snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. You download the Game Time app, you just create an account, and then once you do that, you use the promo code Gleeman, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account on the Game Time app, redeem the code Gleeman for $20 off. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay. Somebody emailed in the Patreon mailbag and said, this isn't a question. I just wanted to point out that Aaron says, okay, after every ad read, which is undeniably true. I've realized, but I don't know if that's if that's just a tick in my brain or it's my way of sort of
you're resetting. Yeah.
Separating out the ad from the real content. But I guess we can go, the Gallo for garlic swap is pretty self-explanatory, I think. We probably don't need to break that down, but I think the Buxton for Larnach and Julien for Polanco ones are each probably worth a little bit of a discussion, and then we'll get into the last night's Sonny Gray, Rocco Baldelli battle royale. That really wasn't, but will be played up that way, I'm sure. So we can talk about that. But with Buxton and Larnach, I think there's a sense that, and we've talked about this, but there's a sense that Larnach needs to get a clear path here to full playing time. Not so much because
where would we find that? Where would we find that clear path, Aaron?
What's funny? Last night, like before the game went nuts and Sonny Gray got removed, and that became clearly what Dan Hayes was going to write his game story about.
Yeah, he
turned to me in like the third inning or something, and he said, I don't know, with Larnach getting sent down, that might be worth writing about. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, how he gets sent down for Buxton, but really it's Kepler that's blocking him. Maybe that's worth something. And I said, Dan, have you ever read The Athletic before? And I sent him a link from 10 days ago that was how long will the Twins let Max Kepler block Matt Wallner and Trevor Larnach? And he went, oh, yeah, but, still. And I thought, feel free to write it again. I'm sure I'll get in trouble for it. Like I'll get the crap for it. But I think with Larnach, he's played like 170 games for the Twins, but I don't know that he's ever played like more than 2 months consecutively, either because he's been sent down like he is now, or he's gotten hurt, which has happened in each of the last 3 seasons. But so he stopped his own momentum such that it existed with injuries, but then within that, he still is, because of Kepler and because of Buxton, but yeah, really because of Kepler, he's the first guy in reserve still, instead of the, clear-cut top of the depth chart. And so I do think there's a sense of like, when is this guy going to just get a clean runway here to do his thing and not have to worry about, getting sent back down? Because now he's been sent up and down, 3 times this season, I think.
Right.
But I will also say, like, he has not taken advantage of the situations that he's been in. Like, yes, would it be great if he just got 6 months, a full season to play, and he played 140 games and he never had to worry about getting sent down and all that stuff? Yes, absolutely. And there are choices the Twins have made, specifically with Kepler, that have kept him from doing that. They knew that was likely going to happen. But here's the truth about Trevor Larnach, and I still think he has the potential to be a above average hitter, but he's 26 years old at this point. He has I'm looking at his stats. He's got 177 games in the majors, 658 plate appearances. So over a full season. Now that's spread over 3 seasons, like I said.
Right. And a lot of those times he was probably hurt.
Yes. But also that's not a good thing for him either. Do you know what I mean? Like he might just be a guy who's hurt. He's hit 222 with a 315 on base percentage and a 376 slugging percentage. None of those three numbers are good. They're all below average. He's got a 690 OPS. His OPS plus is 93, which means he's been 7% worse than a league average hitter, and even worse than that compared to a corner outfielders who are generally good hitters. OPS plus this season is 94, and then within that, he had that really good. He made the opening day roster because Kirilloff was not ready, and he had that really good first 4 or 5 games, including the 3-run homer in Miami. Since then, he's played 43 games. And he's hit 184 with 5 homers. That's just bad. I mean, that warrants being optioned to AAA on its own, regardless of Max Kepler or Byron Buxton or the outfield situation. Like, if you just had a 26-year-old guy in his 3rd major league season, and for 50 games, basically, he hit 184 with very little power, you can't really, put up that much of a fight getting demoted. And I'm not saying he put up a fight. He's pretty professional about things, I think, Larnach. But
yeah, I agree.
I wonder if he's getting to a point where, yes, has he gotten, a full clean look at this thing? Not really. But he also has really failed to take advantage at any point. And he's had some good moments, but, just too many strikeouts. And the weird part to me is, he'll flash such substantial raw power. Like, few guys on the Twins can hit the ball further to more places in the ballpark. Like, he, to dead center, he's had just some monster home runs at Target Field. He can go out to left center. I mean, when he connects, the ball just flies, except you look and it's like, well, he's got a 376 lifetime slugging percentage. He has 18 home runs in 650 plate appearances. Like,
right.
if the power is not going to be there, if it's just going to be sort of 20 homer power or 15, 20 homer power, he can't strike out this much. He's got 222 strikeouts in 177 games. Like, you can't hit 222 with a bad on base percentage and not have power. And, he's done his part in terms of drawing walks. He takes patient at bats. I think he generally takes good at bats. I don't think he swings at bad pitches. I just think when he swings, he just swings and misses so often, especially against non-fastballs, against breaking balls, off-speed pitches, that he just has such trouble finding consistency and putting together long stretches where he's being productive. And I just wonder, at age 26, with 180 games in the majors under his belt, at what point, let's say the next time Byron Buxton gets hurt, or Joey Gallo gets hurt, or Max Kepler gets hurt, or the Twins, decide to finally part ways with Max Kepler, let's say, at what point does Matt Wallner move ahead of Larnach on the call-up pecking order? Like, at what point do the Twins say, we're not giving up on Trevor Larnach, but why, to me at least, why does it continue to be Larnach as first man up or next man up when Wallner, A, has performed better at AAA than Larnach, and B, has actually vastly outperformed him in the majors? Now, it's only been like 30 games or something, but Wallner has certainly been more productive than Larnach when given a chance. And so I think that's the one takeaway from this. Buxton returning and Larnach going back, I think roster-wise, unless they were going to cut Kepler, it's what made sense. That was the expected move. But I just wonder, the next time a left-handed hitting corner outfielder is needed, and given how things go with the Twins, that might be like later this week. I just feel like, what's the argument for calling up Larnach again over Wallner? I wonder if that's,
we should also mention that Wallner also is not a lot younger than Larnach. He's a year younger, right? He's 25 versus 26.
Well, but that would be part of my argument in favor of that, which is, if you're not giving Wallner a chance now, if Wallner cannot get a chance at age 25 in his second season of crushing AAA pitching because he's behind a 26-year-old, 690 OPS Trevor Larnach, well, that doesn't speak real highly of what the Twins think of Trevor Wallner, or Trevor Wallner. There's the platoon. Trevor Wallner, of Matt Wallner. And, maybe that's true. I'm at the point where, why not at least find out? You know what I mean? Like, Wallner's been given 2 opportunities and he's looked pretty decent in both of them, including really good the last time. And so, yeah, I don't know.
You focused on that side of the question, which is a good point. I hadn't really thought too much about where he is in relation to Wallner. As you were reading his career stats,
mm-hmm.
I had crunched the numbers a day before about Max Kepler's stats over those same 3 years.
Yeah.
And we gave all kinds of caveats to Trevor Larnach, right? He has been playing a lot of those games hurt, right? So maybe he's been battling various things. He's clearly been reticent about telling the team sometimes when he was dealing with something. We think that has changed now, right? He is absolutely still learning some stuff. He's having trouble hitting off-speed pitches. He's having trouble, but he's also got, as you mentioned, a certain amount of upside. You take a look at Kepler's stats over those exact same 3 years that we've had Larnach up.
They're almost identical.
They are almost identical. The 215 batting average, 305 on base, 380 slugging, right? Which is similar to, what did you say?
222, 315, right. 370. I mean, it's identical.
Yeah, right.
It's identical. I agree completely. I mean, yes, if your argument here is Max Kepler should be the one to go and to make room for Trevor Larnach, which then in turn would make more room for Matt Wallner then being the next man up, you will find no argument here. I just chose to not start a 15th consecutive podcast ranting about Max Kepler and or Emilio Pagano. I decided to give the people a break. But much like Dan Hayes last night, turning to me and saying, "Hey, have you ever thought about Kepler maybe being the one to go?" I agreed. If that's you and Dan should get together. It's called the Delayed Reaction Club.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. Max Kepler.
I mean, it's just interesting to me that you've got a guy who, we kind of look at Larnach as, close, but not quite there. We're not really sure if he's going to make it. And meanwhile, we've had the other guy down there that we're paying $8.5 million.
Right.
That is, putting up exactly the same stats over the exact same period of time, probably with more at bats. Truth be told, I haven't even taken a look at the plate appearances.
Of course,
and you're just kind of like, well, maybe we should. It's clearly one of them has more upside than the other at this point. You would think.
Yes, I mean,
but
we've both been pretty clear about the Kepler situation. I mean, you could put together a 10-hour tape of you and I ranting about Max Kepler, or you listening to me rant and then you saying, "Yeah, I agree." So yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like, if the choice is Max Kepler or Trevor Larnach, give me Trevor Larnach. If the choice is Max Kepler or Matt Wallner, give me Matt Wallner. If the choice is Max Kepler or almost any, living, breathing 25-year-old outfielder with a pulse, give me that guy. But so yeah, we should mention that. Like, if getting rid of Kepler would create an everyday job for Larnach, which in turn would create much more playing time for Wallner as the next man up, well, yeah, that's killing, I guess, 2 birds, maybe 3 birds with one stone. I've just gotten so frustrated with the Kepler situation and the Twins' lack of movement on that over the last year or 2 years, that I've just
that's probably
given up on that.
You just mentioned this is about as healthy a Twins team as we've seen in probably a year and a half, but certainly the last few months. So, it's not surprising that we can take a look at it and go, maybe it's time to sacrifice some depth for, some possible upside here when it comes to the 10th overall or 11th overall, offense of the American League.
Sure.
So, I understand this is the time it makes the most sense to do that. And you might, if Gallo's hamstring acts up again and Larnach's groin acts up again and Buxton's, everything acts up again, they might be at the point where they're looking for some depth. But I also think one of the things that about this transaction that it calls out is the fact that, you didn't send down Larnach for Kepler when he came off the DL. You send it down for Buxton, which isn't, necessarily a one-to-one move, is that they do have enough flexibility in some places that they can probably accommodate, an injury to a corner outfielder in some places. So I don't know. It feels to me like Well, we said this, I think, at the beginning of June, which is, we are at the point where the clock is ticking on Kepler a little bit. That at some point, if you're keeping him around for depth, that depth starts mattering less and less and less every game that is played at this point.
Right. I mean, it's the world's longest ticking clock.
But listen, we can. Obviously, it's easy to take a look at his performance and say it's not clear why he's here, right? But the answer is the reason the organization is hesitant to leave him is they can't just send him down to AAA and they can't just bury him on the bench, right? They have to actually cut ties with him completely. And this organization does not like to give up depth. And by the way, with all the injuries they have suffered over the last year and a half, 2.5 years, you can see why they were probably a little gun shy about that. Right. Sure. It does feel to me like as the season goes on, that depth becomes a little less critical. So,
well, and let's just cut the shit here. If the guy's hitting 190, which Max Kepler has now since the All-Star break last year,
right?
What is that depth? Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean?
Right,
what is that providing? Like, he's just one of your worst players. The fact that you have an additional bad player around is not depth. And
when a guy's hitting like Mark Contreras, you've always got depth. you can replace him,
Well, yeah, I mean, Max Kepler has ceased being a productive player. Like, I think he's hitting 188 since last year's All-Star break, which we're talking, I don't know, 90 games or something like that. And he wasn't all that good for the year and a half before that either. And so you can say, theoretically, yes, they're keeping Max Kepler around his depth because, hey, if we get rid of Max Kepler and then Trevor Larnach gets hurt, what will we do? Well, A, Max Kepler isn't helping you as is. And B, if you get rid of Max Kepler and then someone gets hurt, what will you do? You will call up Matt Wallner, which you probably should have done anyway. And so I completely agree with what you're saying, which is, why is this a argument of Larnach versus Wallner as next man up, when it's really an argument of why the hell is Kepler blocking both of them or one of them, but we've lost that argument. Like, I mean, we can scream about that till we're hoarse, and beating dead horse, two different kinds of horses, but the same thing related to Max Kepler. But I will say this, people are not going to like this next sentence I'm going to say, but I was told very recently that there is nothing cooking with Max Kepler in terms of moving him at this point. So that's where we're at. And so, yeah, my Larnach versus Wallner thoughts are only in relation to the idea that the Twins just aren't going to cut loose Max Kepler. I think that's a tremendous mistake, but unfortunately that's kind of the reality we're in at this situation. So similarly, I guess, is Julien, who is having a third straight exceptional year in the minors, putting up huge on base percentage, good power numbers, looked good during spring training, is just clearly, major league ready as an offensive player. But because the Twins were only playing him at second base, he was blocked by Polanco. Now, he's fortunate, I suppose, that Polanco now is injured every other week, seemingly now. So Julien is back up for, is this his third stint, I want to say? Yeah, third stint with the Twins this season, and he's basically taking over as the primary second baseman. And I said this a little bit on the Patreon, but I'll say it again. Do not expect Jorge Polanco to be back anytime soon. This is not going to be a 2-week or 3-week hamstring recovery. I think this is going to be, I will be shocked. I mean, he's already been on the IL for 10 days or something. I will be shocked if he's back before July. I might even say before the All-Star break. I'll be shocked. So, as we talk about, runways and clear paths and, extended opportunities, Eddie Julian's going to get one at second base. Now, It may not look real pretty at second base defensively because he's just not looked good and probably not good, but offensively, he looks real nice. And I think I would love to have both Jorge Polanco and Edouard Julien in the lineup together at the same time.
I would like to have them both play second base on the same day, one on the field and one in the batter's box.
That's okay. That's interesting. Yeah, That takes the softball rover idea to a whole nother level, I suppose. But the silver lining here is, yes, you hate to lose Polanco, especially if it ends up being a significant amount of time, which I expect it to be. But you're in a rare position here where you can just say, oh, we'll call up this monster hitting prospect who's, chomping at the bit to get a chance, and we'll just plug him in at second base. And yeah, you're going to suffer defensively. But, you plug in Julien atop that lineup, and he's already made a huge impact. I mean, his ability to draw walks and grind out at bats and make the pitchers work, and then also his ability to hit the shit out of the ball. He's driven the ball. He's got 4 or 5 homers. He's got a bunch of doubles. He can be a decent base runner for them. Aside from the defense, which I'm not saying that's a big factor, the defense, but he has a chance to be a true impact, long-term building block hitter atop this lineup. And I think, similar to the discussion with like Wallner or Larnach, it's a good thing that the Twins are kind of being forced to give him this runway and say, you got a month at least to play. Go do it. And my guess is by the time Jorge Polanco is ready to return, they're not going to have any interest in sending down Edouard Julien, which is going to create, they're going to have to make a decision at that point. Something's going to have to change. But that's,
he's certainly valuable enough that all you have to know about Julien is that whenever since he has been called up, he's been the leadoff hitter.
Right.
I mean, unless they were facing a left-hander like last night, he has been the leadoff guy. So he is already directly considered to be one of the top 4 guys that you are going to be relying on in this offense already. So
yeah, I mean, this might get me nominated for a preposterous statement tournament, but I don't think it's out of the question that right now Edouard Julien is the Twins' best hitter. And I don't mean like today, or I don't mean like over the last 2 weeks. I just mean like true talent level right now going forward. I think there's a reasonable chance that he's their best hitter. Maybe Correa or Buxton is their best hitter, but like I really do believe he's legit. Like I think he's just going to draw a ton of walks. I think he's going to hit for power. I think he's going to steal some bases. I think the strikeout rate with him is going to determine, is he a star or is he just really good? But I think there's some potential to keep the strikeouts reasonable there, or at least balance them with 75 walks a year, which is nice. Yeah. But he's legit. I mean, I'm just so impressed by his ability, and especially you dig into some of the numbers, or you start looking at the like umpiring that's gone against him. Like he just doesn't swing at bad pitches, and a lot of times he doesn't swing at borderline pitches, which crosses passive at times. So that's maybe he gets a little more aggressive in certain spots. But like we talk about this a lot with relief pitchers, where like Brock Stewart kind of comes out of nowhere and you're like, is this guy for real? And you can break down all the numbers you want. You can talk about their background. You can talk about scouting. But at some point, like with a reliever, if you throw 98 with a good slider, you're a good reliever. Like I don't really need to know that much more information about
right.
it.
Yeah.
Now, can you stay healthy? Can you, be a closer, all that stuff. But just you just hand me a pitcher sight unseen and he consistently throws 98, 99 and has got a swing and miss slider. I can tell you with a lot of confidence that, that guy will be a good reliever. With Julien, it's a little more complicated, but you show me a left-handed hitter who can drive the ball to all fields, has shown 20 homer power in the minors and hits the ball hard already in the majors, and has some speed, and more importantly, draws walks just
he's got a batting eye it's elite, right?
Right. And you look at, I think I didn't look updated after last night, but he only had one at bat last night. He pinch hit, but the lowest, there's a stat called chase rate that's on Baseball Savant, which is essentially just how often does this guy swing at pitches that are not in the strike zone. And, any little league coach probably told anybody who listened to this, swing at strikes, don't swing at non-strikes, or make them throw you strikes. And that's, the foundational building block of any hitter. Julien is at I think 15% chase rate. And that was, as of yesterday, tied for the lowest in the majors with Juan Soto, who is like one of the more famous, disciplined, right, walk drawing, impossible to pitch to guys, in the last 50 years or whatever. And so, maybe that changes as pitchers start to attack him more, right, where the passivity comes into play and all that. But if you just show me a 24-year-old left-handed hitter who can hit 20 homers to all fields, has drawn 100 walks in the minors, and just refuses to swing at bad pitches. I can tell you that guy's going to be a pretty good hitter unless the strikeouts just completely overwhelm the rest of the profile. But I'm very excited about Ed Julien, if that's not been apparent since spring training. I feel like I've been doing these little monologues about Ed Julien. You know, I have my Trapper Keeper notebook, and I write Mr. Aaron Julien over and over. You know, I'm so fully convinced that he's legit, and so. You know, if the Polanco injury is what it takes to give him the clear path to prove himself, that guys like Larnach and Wallner are not being given a chance to do in the outfield because of Kepler, then, you know, so be it. That's unfortunate with Polanco, but it's a silver lining for sure.
What gives me when I take a look at the Twins lineup and how this team becomes something more than a mediocre to bad offensive producing lineup, just something to where it's, you know, one of the top half of the American League. I don't feel like that's asking too much. Get to 5th or 6th in the American League. Despite the fact that they've been scoring some runs lately, I take a look at where those runs have been coming from. And, you know, listen, I think Donovan Solano is a good hitter, a decent enough hitter, but I don't want my offense relying on Donovan Solano, right? But when I take a look at, okay, now here Correa's starting to hit. We've got Julien at the top of the lineup. We've got Buxton coming back. Let's see where he's at. Right, you see Kirilloff, you know, continuing to be pretty good with what he has been doing. You know, you're starting to see not just, you know, the results in the short term, like, oh, hey, we actually scored 7 runs today, right? But a top half of the lineup that looks like it could do some damage. Again, I'm more focused on where this offense is in August and September than I am on where they are in June and July. And, you know, I know that we're going to have to figure out where Julien actually slides into the defensive side of this equation, right? And that there's still, you know, some questions about how crowded it can be. But you do start seeing, you know, some hope for, you know, this lineup could continue to move forward a little bit, regardless of the fact that Michael Taylor's suddenly hitting 3-run bombs every, you know, for a 2-week period every other month. You know,
right. You're sort of saying, which I agree with, is like, yeah, you love to get contributions from the Donovan Solanos and the Michael Taylors,
right.
and on, the Willie Castros of the world. That's great. Any team needs that. I mean, if you're going to be successful over 6 months, you need that, but you want to also kind of build what looks like a more sustainable, you know, group of impact hitters. And I think I agree with what you're saying about Julien and Kirilloff and all that stuff, but that's sort of why I view the corner outfield situation and the Kepler situation so negatively, which is depth is valuable in a lot of circumstances, and putting in place a roster or a depth chart where you've kept the floor pretty high in your mind does have value, because as we saw last year, if the bottom drops out of that floor, things can get really bad really quickly. But it's not clear to me that Max Kepler's floor is even all that high anymore. I mean, the guy's hit 185 for now the last 90 games. Like, that's a low floor. Like, the whole premise of we got to keep him around his depth, and at least he's, you know, capable, at least he's competent. Well, that's not even really been the case for a while now. And the flip side B is, to your point, which is you should be trying to move forward to a better lineup just in general, but a more sustainable, you know, group that you can build towards, like you said, a top 5 lineup with, not just how can we kind of maintain averageness for as long as possible here. And to me, Max Kepler does not move you towards that goal an inch. And in fact, he's probably taking you away from that goal. And maybe in time, it proves true that Matt Wallner or Trevor Larnach don't actually move you to that goal either, but there's at least a chance of them moving you to that goal. There's at least a chance of, you know, Matt Wallner being a long-term number 5 hitter for you, you know, and hitting 30 homers in a couple of years and actually, you know, being an impact bat for you. I'm less sure about Larnach, but I haven't ruled that out. Certainly there's more chance of that with Larnach than there is with Kepler. And so on top of all the stuff, just who's better today, I think you can argue that the answer is not Kepler. Who's better in the future? I think you can definitely answer that it's not Kepler. But then bigger picture, more just like theoretically, or like, you know, what is your goal here? Your goal here is to put together a group of, you know, mid-20s hitters who can kind of mature as one and really form a nucleus that's, you know, can actually do some things. And Max Kepler is not going to be part of that. And maybe the Twins don't think Trevor Larnach and Matt Wallner will be part of that either. But man, I'd love to at least find out, right? I mean, like,
right, yeah.
Especially at a time when you're not getting production from Kepler anyway, I would just like to find out. So,
right.
Yes, you've managed to bring up Max Kepler as a point that I hadn't even considered.
I didn't actually bring him up that time. That was you.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to blame you when people say. Okay, should we
By
talk
the way,
a
you're
little
going to love the Twins Daily story we got today by Red Bulls too.
Oh boy. This is going to get me in trouble with the Twins.
Yep.
Is it really?
Yeah, it might get me in trouble with the Twins. We'll see.
Who, for all their strengths and weaknesses, not the best at identifying satire on the internet, let's say, about themselves. But so yeah, I'm sure I haven't read it, but
well, it was published during the podcast. So
that's smart. Publish it while I'm busy.
That's how I blindside you. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Should we talk? Well, I'll give you two choices here: Sonny Gray or Jorge Lopez. Who do you want to talk about right now?
Well, we better talk Sonny Gray.
Okay. So last night, Sonny Gray starts against the Tigers, and he runs into some real trouble in the fourth inning.
Right.
35 pitches. They're up 4-2. Yeah, 4-2. 35 pitches, which I will say in the minor leagues, when pitchers for the Twins, pitching prospects, reach 35 or 40 pitches, I forget what the cutoff is, in an inning, they're removed from the game.
Right.
Because the thought process is it becomes too high stress within a single inning to have a guy throw 35, 40 pitches, which almost always, involves the bases being loaded or multiple walks. It's hard to throw 40 pitches efficiently.
And the same way throwing 130 over 9 innings is a stress on the arm. Throwing 40, 45 in an inning is a stress on the arm.
And so I know people, again, I suspect some people who maybe don't have access to watching the game are going to look and say, well, Sonny Gray was removed after 4 innings and he only threw, I forget what it was, 78 pitches or whatever it was. Right. You go, well, obviously he had room for one more inning. He wasn't even at 80 pitches. Well, yeah, but it's not the average pitch count. It's the fact that in the inning before he was pulled, he walked 3 guys, had to wriggle out of a bases loaded jam, and ended up throwing 35 pitches, which is very high stress. And Baldelli actually said afterward that had Gray not gotten the last batter he faced out, he was going to get removed in the 4th inning.
Right.
Giovanni Moran was fully warmed up, and that was going to be Sonny Gray's last batter no matter what. They weren't going to let him get to 40 or 45 pitches and allow multiple runs. Now, Sonny Gray did get the last out. He did wriggle out of his own jam pretty effectively. And then he went to the dugout and he put his jacket on to remain warm, and he sat there. And then, seemingly right around the time he was starting to get ready to go back out for the 5th, Baldelli came up to him and said, you're coming out of the game. And to the surprise of no one, Sonny Gray was not happy to hear that. And they had, a pretty lengthy discussion, heated discussion, let's call it. It didn't strike me. I don't know. Did you see?
No, I did not see any of the discussion. The Canada's game version didn't have it. So
in the real time, Bally showed 3 separate little 5-second clips, because they would cut to the dugout between pitches. It was maybe the only circumstance this year where the pitch clock really was bad, because there wasn't as much time to gawk at what was going on in the dugout. But then they came back from commercial the next inning and played kind of the extended director's cut of the whole discussion. And, people can watch it for themselves and, try to read lips or body language. My takeaway watching it in real time before even talking to the people involved afterward was Gray was not happy to be removed, but he's never happy to be removed. He even said that after the game. I've never been in a game in my entire life where I wanted to come out of the game. So
Right.
yeah, that happened. I think also he was very frustrated with his own performance, and rightfully
Yep.
so.
Yeah,
'Cause
he sounded like it in the game, in the
Right.
post game interview.
And then as sort of the icing on that cake, he was surprised to be removed. Like he clearly
Right.
was expecting to go back out there. So you fold all three of those things in. He never wants to come out of the game. He was mad at himself and frustrated by the situation, and kind of, I don't want to say got blindsided, but wasn't expecting to get removed. So his reaction was basically, what do you mean I'm getting removed? And then he was frustrated, and it looked to me like when Baldelli came up to tell him that, Baldelli wanted to like chat about it, and Sonny Gray tried to like grab his glove and just head to the clubhouse, which I probably would do that also, rather than, I think probably in Sonny Gray's mind, it was like, I can either have some sort of confrontation here, or I can just, let some of the
Right.
steam out in the clubhouse, which is the better way to go. But for whatever reason, Rocco Baldelli kind of halted that and wanted to talk about it, which is how everyone saw the, 45-second conversation. But,
Right.
It didn't get physical by any means. It didn't strike me as yelling. I mean, neither of them are really yellers generally. So afterward, well, and so to make matters worse, then Giovanni Moran comes in for the fifth,
Right.
gives up 3 runs, and then
Right.
the Twins also give up more. They go on and they lose. They give up 6 unanswered runs
Right.
after Gray's departure. So then, afterward we talked to both of them, and Sonny Gray went first. And Sonny Gray is prone to monologuing. He'd be a good podcast.
Yeah.
Sonny Gray, you basically
Yes.
you stick a quarter in Sonny Gray with your first question, and he just goes. And
Yeah.
this was a version of that I've never even seen from him, which is Audra Martin asked him basically, did you want to stay in? And he went for like 6 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was 2 questions, honestly.
Yeah.
It was 2 questions, and it was maybe a 15-minute long
Well, let me look. I have
conversation.
I have this on my phone because I recorded it. It was, let's see. I want to say it was 10 minutes and 17 seconds, and he was asked 3 questions. So-
He was asked 3 questions. Okay,
Yeah.
I missed the third of it, I guess.
Yeah. And so the clips have been posted, I think, but my sense of being in the room and watching Sonny Gray, and also having sat in now on, 25 post-start media sessions with Sonny Gray, he's always kind of like that. Often the frustration is directed at himself, and
Yes.
the kind of monologue. He likes to walk himself through the start.
Yes.
And if that answers your question, even better.
He is
But if-
digesting verbally right in front of you.
Right. And
Yeah.
if you watch the clip from last night, he spoke for 11 minutes. It was probably about 3 minutes of material repeated 3 times.
Right. Yes.
And I'm not one to talk when it comes to that. Like I've repeated 90 seconds of Max Kepler material 400 times, obviously. So I'm not ripping him there, but I mean, he truly, like, sometimes he'll just say the same phrase over and over and over again. And it's because I think in his mind, he's sort of zoned out. He's like past the
in
point
the
of
fight.
doing,
In the fight.
right. He literally, I transcribed this interview, so I know.
Yeah.
Here's what I did. I went upstairs to transcribe it, and I very quickly typed, I wanted to stay in the fight. And then I copied and pasted it over and over so I wouldn't have to type it the same phrase again, because I knew he said it like 30 times. But my takeaway from that was, and by the way, I appreciate the emotion from Sonny Gray, and I'd
Sure.
rather have someone who overtalks
Right.
and walks you through it than just gives you quick answers. So I'm not criticizing him on that front. My sense was he was a little bit, like I said, a little bit blindsided by it. He was very frustrated with himself. Like he
Yes.
got asked questions as it relates to the confrontation with Rocco, and he made it clear he wasn't happy about that. But I don't think he really played up, any sort of long-term issue or, that. I think he was more harsh on himself, basically saying,
Yeah.
I
agree.
keep doing this to myself. I don't know why I keep walking the bases loaded or, cruising for 3 or 4 innings and then just running into trouble in the 5th because my command fails me. And he kept saying, I'm not even getting hit hard. I'm just
Right.
doing it to myself, and I've got to stop doing that. I'm not going to read the exact quote, but
the answer to the first question was all about, being frustrated that he had to leave the game, etc., and how he felt like he was still
Right.
in the fight. And the answer to the second question, which was even longer than the answer to the first question, was almost solely about, I'm so frustrated with myself. I've got to figure this out. It's happening over and over and over again. I've got to figure it out the next couple, 3 days. Like, it was clear that there was a tremendous amount of frustration around it.
Yes. And he was asked basically, like, is this a mechanical thing? And he said, I don't know. I'm going to spend the next 2 or 3 days trying to figure that out because I've got to get this right. I cannot continue to do this. And that is obviously true. I mean, to his point then off that was, look, I keep pitching myself into these jams and I hate it and I'm really frustrated by it. But within that, I do generally pitch myself out of the jams.
Right.
And he kind of said, my takeaway from that, or my perception of what he was saying, was I would like credit for that. I would like to have more leeway than an average pitcher. I would like for Baldelli in that situation to say, yes, he's pitched himself into a huge jam. Yes, he walked 3 guys. Yes, he got to 35 pitches in the 4th inning. But we've seen Sonny Gray get out of that and then be okay afterward. And I think he wanted Baldelli to say, you got through that. Let's see what you got in the 5th. Now, he also said, I get where Baldelli's coming from. I was pitching horribly, which, is undeniably true. I don't know. I was debating at the time, like, would I have removed him? I think it was, to me, like a real 50-50. I think I probably would have left him in for the 5th, but I also just think the focus is on performance a lot of the time. But in the Twins' mind, it's the 35 pitches and the high stress inning and the notion of, do we really need to squeeze another inning out of a guy who's clearly struggling and doesn't have his best stuff and mechanically seems out of whack? Do we really need to squeeze an extra inning out of him on June 15th in, by the way, what is a 2-run game, so that if we're wrong and he does go back out there and walks 2 more guys, then we're going to have an issue on our hands again. Now, it happened that they went to the bullpen and the bullpen was terrible. So that
also, I mean, Moran has been pretty good. They have a fair amount of confidence in what he's been doing recently. So
yeah, I don't know. It was interesting. And then Baldelli afterward, just to finish this up, he came in. We talked to Gray first. Then there was like a 5-minute break, and then Baldelli came in. And Baldelli was asked similar questions. The one takeaway I had from Baldelli was he repeated multiple times, I have no problem with Sonny Gray's behavior there. I want a pitcher who wants to stay in the game. I want a pitcher who fights to stay in the game. I don't want to come up to a pitcher and say, how you feeling? And have that pitcher go, not great. Why don't you pull me? He's like, I want them to force me to make the tough decision. I don't want guys opting out of games. I don't want guys saying, you might want to think about taking me out. But his other point was, somebody has to make the tough decision. And it's generally a good thing for Sonny Gray to have the attitude of, like he said, I've never in my life wanted to leave a start. If that's the case, well, there are starts in which the good decision is removing Sonny Gray, right? I mean, that has to be true. And so if Sonny Gray is never happy to be removed from a start, someone has to anger Sonny Gray at times by removing him from starts. And it's a good decision sometimes. Was it a good decision last night? I don't know. But even when it is a good decision, Sonny Gray is not going to be too happy about it. So I thought, under the circumstances, I'm not going to say that they, hugged it out afterward and went for breakfast this morning or anything like that. But I don't know. I thought they both handled it reasonably well. In the dugout, which I've seen 50 times worse than that in a dugout before, between manager and player, or player and player.
Yeah, I mean, when they are both at feeling the pressure, or their emotions are riding as high as they're going to ride.
I mean, ask Twins bench coach Jace Tingler how the last month in San Diego went in terms of dugout. There were multiple fights between players under his watch. I mean, stuff happens. And so I thought, given the circumstances, they both handled it pretty well post-game, while both sticking to their guns generally. Like, they didn't say, I take it back, or I made a mistake, or anything like that. They both basically said, I think I was right, and the other person disagreed, and that's fine. And, we'll smooth things over. But, I think it's also worth noting that 2 things here. One, in Sonny Gray's last 6 starts, he has a 3.81 ERA with only 23 strikeouts in 31 innings and 14 walks in those 31 innings. And he's gone more than 6 innings in just 2 of his last 8 starts. He hasn't looked that good. I mean, like he said, he doesn't know why this keeps happening to him, and he needs to fix it. And then the other thing I'll point out is the night before, the day before, the Twins matched their entire 2022 total with their 39th start of this season that lasted 6+ innings. They've already matched last season's total, and as of this morning, they are tied for the major league lead in innings per start. They are tied with the Astros. And so did Sonny Gray get a quick hook last night? Absolutely. Did Sonny Gray deserve a quick hook last night? I think it's 50-50 in my mind. I think the way he's pitched over the last few weeks played a part in that. The 35 pitches he threw played a part in that. But beyond that, the idea that Rocco is looking to pull these guys early from games, like he's looking for an excuse to do that, is very outdated at this point. I don't think it was ever true. I think it was based, like we've talked about, on Chris Archer and Dylan Bundy and Devin Smeltzer and just fearing those guys just getting blown up if they're allowed to go deeper in games. But we've seen this year, he wants these guys to go 6 or 7 innings. He's given Sonny Gray pretty long leash in a lot of situations. And in some of those situations, Sonny Gray has made it a mistake. Like Sonny Gray has run into trouble in the 6th inning or the 7th inning or in the 4th inning in this case. So I don't know. The Twins starting pitchers are going longer in their starts than anyone in baseball. Sonny Gray is struggling, and it was a 4-2 game. So I think, I don't know, hopefully today cooler heads prevail. But if not, I think they're both, it's one of those, I don't want to call it an argument, but it's one of those things where they both can kind of be right and kind of be wrong, I think.
I was, when I saw him come out again, I thought he sure seems to be coming out early a lot recently. So yeah, I took a quick look at his game log the last 3. It's the 3rd time in his last 4 starts that he has come out after the with less than 80 pitches.
Right.
And that made me wonder, are they trying to protect him from something? Like, is there something going on that this is they are being careful with Sonny Gray for some reason? And it didn't sound like from any of the conversations I heard or any of the interviews I heard that is an issue, that there's nothing that they're worried about with him dealing with a tired arm or.
No, but here I'll say, yeah, he said he was fine physically, but also he always says that, but I don't think he's hurt or anything. I think he clearly has not been on the top of his game lately. So that probably has their antenna up a little bit, but also let's be honest, Sonny Gray is a really good pitcher and he's been great for the Twins, but Sonny Gray has been no workhorse over the course of his career. I mean, last season he threw 119 innings for the Twins. Right. The season before that for Cincinnati, he threw 135 innings. He's thrown more than 175 innings 0 times since 2015. And so
and as I looked at those last 4 games, I was like, yeah, he's been under 80 pitches the last three of the last 4 games. The one time he wasn't, he started the inning in Cleveland. He started the 7th inning versus Cleveland, I think under 70 pitches, right, or right around 70 pitches, and ended up giving up 2 runs and got pulled at 90 pitches. And the game went from 2-1 to 3-2.
Right. And here's the thing, like I said, Sonny Gray will admit he never thinks it's right to pull him from a game, except there's been a couple of times like that game that you just pointed to this season where Rocco Baldelli has put him back out there longer than most people probably expected and has given him a chance to extend the outing and has done what Sonny Gray would undoubtedly want him to do. And it hasn't always worked out. And afterward, no one ever goes, boy, the gall of Sonny Gray to do that, or, fire Sonny Gray and all that. Because no one ever cares when it doesn't work out. Everyone just has this, nirvana in their head of every starting pitcher goes 7 innings every day. When they're given a chance to do that and they don't come through in that spot, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. But it does sometimes lead to a manager being cautious the next time or, the next few times. So I don't know. I think The bigger issue is they got to get Sonny Gray back on track, because Sonny Gray
Right.
has been their most valuable player this season.
Right.
Sonny Gray is their best pitcher. Sonny Gray is their best chance to have a true number one starter. Okay, so let's just finish up with Jorge Lopez
with a big pick me up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, nobody is complaining that they left. They don't leave Jorge Lopez in long enough. Right? So,
exactly.
what do you
right.
want? Lopez, we've talked quite a bit about him, but he was used. Let's see. What was the score? It was 5-4.
5-4 when he came in the 8th inning, right?
Right. And I will say I was surprised by that.
I was too.
He warmed up alongside Brock Stewart, and I said, boy, that's interesting. I guess that means if the Twins don't score and they're still down a run, it's going to be Jorge Lopez. If they do score and either tie it or take the lead, it'll be Brock Stewart, which, yes, that's logical. It's just that down a run, well, not high leverage by any means, probably on the low end of medium leverage, basically. Down a run is sure as hell not the spot I want Jorge Lopez in, because that can turn into down 4 runs. Although he did pitch a scoreless 8th.
Yeah, the 8th inning went great. Yeah.
I mean, he did give up, I think he gave up 1 hit, but like, and his velocity was down a little bit. But yes, he got out of the 8th inning. To go back to him for the 9th inning is just, I mean, that is, people are going to obsess about the Sonny Gray situation yesterday. I mean, I think the most egregious decision was sending Jorge Lopez, not letting him end on a relative high note and sending him back out there to, put the game out of reach, basically.
Maybe.
But he's been held back for low leverage. Their problem is they don't play a lot of low leverage games because they don't score runs and their pitching's been good. Right. So, down a run is low leverage, relatively speaking, for them. There aren't a lot of blowouts one way or the other with the Twins lately that they can use someone like Jorge Lopez in. But it's just startling, like the how quickly and thoroughly he's fallen apart. He pitched 12 innings in April with a 0 ERA. He gave up an unearned run, but a 0 ERA. He was closing some games. He was their primary setup man. He was coming through in big spots. Since May 1st, he's allowed 16 runs in 15 innings. And it's getting worse, not better. It's put them in such a difficult spot because he can't be sent to the minors. Right. You can say just put him on the injured list, but that has to be a real injury, or at least the player has to, approve of whatever the situation is. And that's not happening. So, it's not dissimilar, I guess, to Pagan in the middle of last year, where the Twins say, well, we're just going to bump him to the bottom of the bullpen hierarchy, and we're only going to use him in spots that don't matter, except then he ends up coming into spots that do kind of matter. Right. Theoretically.
And you can only do that with so many pitchers. You're still kind of trying to do with Pagan.
Right. Yeah. You're doing that with Pagan. You're doing that with Josh Winder. You're doing on and on and on. Like when half the bullpen is low leverage and you don't have many low leverage, well, guess what? Somebody's pitching medium leverage. Right. You look back at what they gave up to get him, which at this point looks horrible for them. Jenier Cano, who was sort of a toss into the trade, has been the best reliever in the American League this season, is going to make the All-Star team. And then Cade Povich, who was the main guy in the trade at the time, a left-handed starting pitcher who I think was at high A or double A at the time, has really, taken a step forward. Actually, last night, I didn't tweet this because it would have made everybody furious as Lopez was struggling, but Cade Povich took a perfect game into the 7th inning at double A for the Orioles and had 12 strikeouts. I mean, he's emerged as like a borderline top 100 prospect. He's probably going to be in the majors, if not this season, then certainly next season. That trade just has a chance to look abysmal for the Twins. I mean, it already does look abysmal for the Twins, but they thought there was some risk with Lopez. He only had a track record when they traded for him of like 50 innings of,
but there was also significant upside.
He made the All-Star team.
Yeah.
Right. And the argument at the time, and we made it, was, yes, his track record is really bad, and he's only been really good for 50 innings, but he's only been a reliever for 50 innings. And so the track record being bad as a starter isn't necessarily disqualifying from a guy immediately becoming a good reliever. I mean, we see that right now with Brock Stewart, or we see that with, Glenn Perkins or Joe Nathan or whoever. Sometimes you move to the bullpen and it's just a completely different. Unfortunately, from the moment they traded for him, he just has not been good. I mean, he pitched himself from the closer role to mop up in about a month, in August of last season. And then they handed him back a setup role, and he was good in April. And now he's pitched himself into a mop up role again.
Yeah.
And it's a tough spot. There's no easy way to sort of set him aside and not have to use him unless there's an injury involved. But I mean, I really wonder at this point, when do you start? They don't want to give up on him because they were counting on him to fill a key role. They don't really have a replacement. It's not like the bullpen is overflowing in great options at this point. And then B, like I said, they gave up a fair amount to get him at the time, and that has turned into an incredible amount of value right now. And so to give up on him to, trade him or cut him or DFA him right now,
yeah.
I mean, that's
horrendous
optics.
It's one thing just to try to figure out what you're going to do with the player, how you're going to redo rehab the player, et cetera, get him back on track. They also, in the meantime, are trying to juggle through, just one or a little too much juggling going on in the bullpen right now with Theobar out. Jax, thank God Jax is starting to look like his old self again, because good Lord, where would they be without him the last, 2 weeks? Thank God for Brock Stewart coming in and doing some stuff. Like they just, it feels like they're going into every gunfight one bullet short,
Yes.
a lot of this stuff. So,
yeah. And with Lopez, I mean, I think he's been bad enough for long enough, and his lack of track record should be reason for skepticism that he can turn it around. I mean, we've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
When Jax was struggling, I think we both were on this show saying, give it time. There's reason to think he can get back on track. And I'm not just saying that because he is back on track now, but with Pagan, that's not something I said. With some relievers, you look at it and it's subjective. Obviously, there's some objectivity in it, but it's subjective. With Lopez, I mean, I've been saying this for weeks now. I have no faith in him being back on track, and I don't believe if there is a back on track. I mean, I don't think he's as bad as he looks. I think he can become a functional reliever again. But I think the version of him that they thought they were trading for does not exist in reality, or at least will not exist. And so at that point, you got to look at your bullpen. You got to look at, it becomes a sunk cost. Like, yes, you gave up a really lot to get him, and that looks horrible right now. But there's no way to undo that. And letting Jorge Lopez go out and hurt you more game by game is not going to make the trade look any better. It's going to make it look even worse. And so the equation or the math that they kind of have to do now is it's going to if he's going to get back on track, it's going to take a while here. Can you live with him in a low leverage role for a while, let's say a month, if you think there's a chance that gets him back on track? But then the math you have to do is, are we confident, even if he kind of gets back on track, that he's someone we can rely upon in a medium or high leverage role in the second half of this season? Whereas with Pagan, their thing is like, well, we'll get him back on track, but we'll still just use him as a low leverage guy. Well, if that's the case, then what are you doing with Lopez? And then beyond that, part of the reason he costs a lot to get, and part of the reason they targeted him was he was not just a rental. He's under control for this season and next season. Except at this point, what does the team control for 2024? What value does that have in Jorge Lopez? Like, if you're not even able to use him in games that matter now. And so, I mean, I don't know. I'm not someone who gives up on this type of thing easily. And there's a very obvious need for a Lopez type reliever to step forward. But man, I don't know. I don't know. Like,
I'll give you one more thing to worry about a little bit. If the Twins end up making a trade at the trade deadline, they've got about a 50% success rate on these things when they're going for relief pitchers, right? They had Dyson, right? Did not work out. Romo did work out. Fuller kind of worked out fairly well. And Lopez is not working out. So, if they are trying to address this, if they do try to address this at the trade deadline, which is looking more and more like they're going to need to do, they don't have the best hit rate when it comes to making trades for these guys. So
they could look into Jenny or Cano from the Orioles. Pick him up maybe. So yeah, Jorge Lopez, I would describe him as a full-scale mess at this point. Okay,
Speaking of full scale mess, I will be back in town on Monday.
Yeah, we're gonna do a Patreon Monday in person.
We will be talking about the Tigers series. So, if they win, maybe, if they take 2 out of 3 from the Tigers, give yourself a treat and you check in for the Monday morning show where we talk about the successful series versus the Tigers.
Yeah. And you know what? If they get swept by the Tigers, you might want to listen to that show anyway.
Give yourself a treat.
Yeah.
Give yourself some therapy.
Yeah, it's Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. We would love to have you join us. I think we're at our all-time high now for subscribers. We're nearing the 4,000 subscriber mark, which we talked a little bit about my situation with the Athletic, and I can tell you guys that the success of the Patreon podcast and this podcast in general has really changed both of our lives, but especially given the state of the baseball writing industry at this point, has really been huge for me. And so I thank you guys for that. And if you've been on the fence about joining the Patreon, now would be a great time to do it.
You can listen to us break down the series the same way that Sonny Gray breaks down a poor start versus Detroit.
Yeah, I do. I should start holding the baseball in my hand. He held the baseball in his hand that entire time, and I watched him. And sometimes when he's in a sort of good mood, he'll toss the baseball up in the air to himself and catch it like 50 times while he's talking. This time I watched him and he kept it kind of by his like thigh or hip while he was sitting there at the podium, and he just spun the ball over and over in his hands with what looked to me like a curveball grip, just over and over and over like a stress ball, basically.
That's funny.
Had to be 500 times or something like that. So maybe I'll try that during a podcast. All right. Thank you to Game Time. Download the Game Time app and use the promo code Gleeman. And also Harry's Razors. Go to harrys.com/Gleeman. And thank you guys for listening. And we will be back Monday.
Gleeman